The understanding of what kind of woman is considered beautiful has varied among people depending on time, the era, and the conditions in which they lived. Welcome to Flip Side of History, the other side of the known history. Today, we will tell you about beauty standards for women throughout our human history. For example, in ancient times, the standard of beauty was a woman with full and saggy breasts, wide hips, and a belly. Full breasts spoke of the ability to nurse a child. Saggy breasts indicated that the woman had already nurtured several offspring. Wide hips spoke of the ability to give birth easily, and the belly spoke of the fat that saved a woman from the cold. The famous statue of Venus of Willendorf is now considered a prehistoric ideal of a woman's beauty. Later, concepts of beauty changed. For example, in ancient Greece, women with large hips and small breasts were considered beautiful. Also, the Greeks paid attention to the length of their hair. The longer was the hair, the more noble was its owner. They valued proper facial features, a chin without dimples, and light skin. The most fascinating thing was that the main symbol of female beauty among the Greeks was considered to be a single eyebrow, so many women specially painted it with either black charcoal or glued lint. Criteria of beauty of ancient Egypt were, in fact, quite similar to modern ones. Slender women with long legs, thin waist, narrow hips and shoulders, small breasts and symmetric facial features were appreciated. Also, Egyptians paid attention to the skin of women. It had to be golden and shining, and the thickness of hair. The hair must have been black with a bluish tint. The ideal Roman girl was considered a slender and trim girl. The standard of beauty included neat breasts and wide hips, but a girl had to remain graceful. Her skin was pale and her eyes were huge. In North and South America, standards naturally differed depending on which tribe the woman belonged to. For instance, Cherokee girls were not supposed to have body hair anywhere except on the head, which shocked the first colonizers. The Inca ideal of a woman's beauty was purity, strong hips, calves, and a large number of braided pigtails. The Aztecs considered women with fair skin beautiful, so they actively used clay to whiten the skin of the face. The Mayans' concept of beauty was quite unique. By default, the owners of strabismus were considered beautiful, and girls also had their teeth drilled and precious stones inserted into the holes, which was considered a symbol of nobility and wealth of the feminine gender. Mayans also believed that the shape of the skull along the line, from the crown to the tip of the nose, should be perfectly or at least maximally straight. So newborns practically from birth were put on the head with special wooden caps that could regulate the angle of inclination. In this straightforward way, by the age of 3, the shape of the baby's skull had acquired the size that corresponded to the standards. India traditionally considered women with full hips, narrow waists, and puffy lips, large breasts and flowing body lines beautiful. Also, Indians paid attention to the length of hair, the longer the better, and of course to the unity of the physical and spiritual in a woman. Chinese definitions of women's beauty varied not only from time to time, but also from era to era. The common standard was a small foot. That is why girls were bandaged firmly from childhood to keep their feet from growing. Very often this led to such deformities in the feet that girls could not even walk on their own. However, this was regarded as a sufficient sacrifice for the sake of marriage. During the Qing dynasty, it seems unbelievable at first glance that girls with huge nails were considered very beautiful. The beauties who wanted to marry well grew them for several years. The explanation of this fact is quite simple. Long nails were an indicator of wealth and prosperity and meant that the girl did not do anything with her hands. But during the time of the Tang dynasty, it was very difficult for Chinese women to reach the ideal of beauty, because to the standard requirements, chiseled figure, small feet, thin arms, were added thick cheeks. It was thick cheeks that gave the face a regular circle shape, so poor beauties had to work, very hard to marry successfully. And in Japan, women differed according to their marital status. As soon as a girl got married, she began to paint her teeth in black. As for the standards of female beauty in the Rus, they corresponded almost entirely to all the signs of a healthy woman who was able to give birth, nurse, and raise children, as well as to run a household. That is why in Russia were valued dance, fair-haired girls with large hips and breasts, strong legs and arms. In addition, the skin of the face had to be white, the cheeks with a blush, and the eyebrows fat and black. Therefore, it is not surprising that beauties actively used whitewash, blush, mostly beet, and an antimony to blacken their eyebrows. In medieval Europe, standards of beauty were largely shaped by religious doctrines. This is why women wore closed dresses, although sometimes there were quite shocking fashion trends. For example, at one time it was believed that a beautiful girl should not have a single hair on her eyes, so unfortunate girls were forced to pluck eyelashes. Later came the fashion for short teeth, which also did not add positively, wishing to become beautiful. After all, to sit on the chair at the dentist of the time was, to put it mildly, more than difficult. Besides, in 19th century Europe, instead of the typical corsets that squeezed the body, divorced became fashionable, which parted the breasts, creating more space between them. In England, there were interesting features, where the standards of female beauty were, first of all, indicators of nobility and wealth. In England, in the 17th century, the necklines were in fashion among the noble ladies, and it was believed that the whiter the skin on the chest, the more beautiful the woman. Moreover, girls who had veins were especially valued, so many beauties specially drew blue veins in the zone of cleavage. On the other hand, in Victorian England, despite the abundance of prohibitions, closed and strict clothing, thanks to the innovations of Prince Albert and the standards of beauty was added, which was piercings on the intimate parts of the body. So our time is already the repetition of what has been done before. And of course, the 20th century was the most mobile in changing the standards of female beauty. During World War I, the so-called Gibson girls were considered beautiful, with a narrow waist, puffy lips, large breasts and thighs. And the standard itself appeared thanks to the drawings of the American artist and illustrator Charles Gibson. But after the end of the war and the US financial crisis, the standard of beauty began to change dramatically. Rebellious girls of the so-called boyish constitution became fashionable. Girls even purposely tightened their breasts to meet the new standards. It was exactly from this point onwards that dress length began to shorten and shoulders to bare. Many believed that the type of rebel girl with short hair was the beginning of the thinness craze. After World War II, women with an hourglass figure, wide hips, narrow waist and large breasts were considered beautiful. In the USSR, conversely, also in the post-war period, a woman's fullness was not considered shameful. On the contrary, during the hungry post-war years, too much depended on a woman. So firmly built, with wide hips and breasts women, like in the old days, again became the ideal of beauty. However, with the beginning of the 60s, when the emancipation and other fashion trends gained momentum, the rebel girl with a boyish physique, small breasts and short haircuts returned. Over time, it was replaced by the image of a successful girl who has time to look after herself, an athletic body, a tan, large or medium breasts, long slender legs, and a narrow waist. And at one point, during the so-called heroin boom, pale girls whose skin was streaked with veins were considered beautiful, but this sort of happiness did not last long. And nowadays, plastic surgeons who can do anything are in charge of the standards of beauty. That is why today, every man is looking for the one that only he likes, paying no attention to generally accepted standards, which, by and large, already do not exist, nor to advice. Perhaps this is how it should really and truly be. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel and leave a like.